Hello and welcome to Jessie Bear Book Club Vlogs. Today we are talking about All About History, issue number 90. I know it is a back issue, it's a follow-on from my little magazine haul. And this one is all about Ivan the Terrible. And it was an interesting read, I will say that. Some bits were a little bit boring. You know, it starts off with the usual, cover page intro. Some of the artwork is good. And then it has a very, very boring article. I'm sorry for anybody who likes the Etruscans. You know when you read a word in your head and then you have to say it out loud and you're like, how do I actually pronounce this? So Etruscans. Very boring article about how they were part of the building of Rome. I didn't enjoy it. It was very dry indeed. So in every single magazine they have a special article where they talk about, toy making or the Etruscans or the Romans or something of that nature, and they cover what the person wore in their day-to-day life, which I actually really enjoy these little bits. The articles themselves can be a bit dry. I read most of this. It does have a timeline. I mean, the one about toys in the last one I reviewed was much better. But moving along, we get to the featured article about Ivan the Terrible. I do know a little about Ivan the Terrible. I absolutely love this artwork. All About History magazines have the nicest artwork. Isn't that really cool? And the article was good. It was thorough, which I enjoy. But the only thing is, it was a bit, if you didn't know anything about Russian history, and I am no big Russian history buff, it's hard to follow. It doesn't give very many names for nobles or anything, and it is good, it's detailed, but it doesn't go into any more detail about the people surrounding him, his court, his family life. I would have liked a family tree, just saying. There is this lovely little article about Ivan the Terrible and Elizabeth I, which I enjoyed. It explains how Ivan and Elizabeth used to write letters to each other and how he actually asked her at one point, when there was a civil war in Russia, if he could take sanctuary in England, and how he thought at one point when they were writing that she was proposing marriage. Very funny. There's a timeline of his life as well. It talks about, was he actually terrible? Is this a mistranslation? I'm pretty sure he did some pretty bad things, but it's interesting. It's two sides to every story. Two sides to every emperor or czar. Some kind of Renaissance art there. It's wordy. I like it, but it's wordy, and it compares him as well to some of the other kings and queens that are famous throughout history, but really with no connection apart from, of course, the Tsar of Russia, the last Tsar. But it's good. I think, personally, after reading my second All About History magazine, if you're not interested or overly interested with the guy or woman on the front of the magazine, don't buy it because the articles can be quite dry. Moving along to the second article, I was very interested in this book, The Paris Theatre of Terror. I love that art. Look at that. Isn't that so pretty? But yet again, this was a pretty dry article. It does go into a lot of detail. You do learn things about the First and Second World War. I was hoping there'd be more information about practical effects because that's something I'm quite interested in. It did have these little kind of synopsis of short stories or short plays that were told in the Paris Theatre of Horror, which was interesting. There's also a movie I want to watch about the actress, one of the actresses who was in this theatre, who was known to be the most assassinated woman in theatre. But there is this bit, and this is what annoyed me about this article. They have this black page. I thought it was part of the article. It is not. It is some weird ass advert, which is in there for no apparent reason, and it just bugged me. It shouldn't be there. They could have put it at the end. Why is it right in the middle of this article? Why? Maybe it's a pet peeve of mine. Maybe, I'm annoyed about something nobody else would be annoyed about, but it bugged me. The article then goes on to talk about really the downfall of the theatre and why it lost prominence due to the uprising in movies, but also how some of the practical effects were then used in Hammer horror movies, and I love a good Hammer horror movie. So that was interesting. Then we've got the daily life of a Mayan, which again was pretty dull. I mean, when you think Mayans, you think blood sacrifice, ripping out hearts on top of temples. I don't need to learn a load of stuff about what they ate. But But I suppose if you're interested in Mayan culture, it would be an interesting read. Me personally, I skimmed it. I think my stepdad would be interested in it. He's done a lot of traveling in South America. Might save it for him. Then we get on to the dark side of the Renaissance, which talks about, you know, what these portraits actually portrayed, who the sitters were, who the painters were, the civil wars that went on in Italy, which were one of the reasons, like, people fought for artist patronages and so on. There is an interesting little article about the Mona Lisa and who she was and who her husband was and how he was involved in the slave trade. I would much prefer it if this article had been longer. They could have cut something out and made this half a page instead. I mean, it is one of the most famous portraits in the world. They could have at least done that. Moving along, of course, you have to have your Second World War hit in every single history magazine. There's always articles about the Second World War, which, if you did it in school like I did, you can live without. There also was this article about the warrior women in Viking history and the Valkyries. It didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. It was interesting, but it kind of just covered all the bases. No big shakes, nothing new there. It did have some nice things about goddesses though, which I enjoyed reading about. The magazine then has its standard battle report, which it seems to do every issue. And then it has another article about the Second World War. Oh, but it's the Second World War involving Spain and the Spanish Civil War and the implications the Second World War had on Spain, which I found very interesting. But growing up in Spain, I kind of knew all this already, you know, because you cover it in Spanish primary school to an extent. And just living in Spain, you know, I would go to Spanish museums, so you know, you cover it. It's part of where you live, you know about it. Moving along, look at Mr. Churchill there. But I like as well the fact that it's like, a magazine is like an old newspaper. Like, they've obviously updated it, but I thought it was really cool the way they put it together, like it was an old newspaper. That was interesting, and I loved some of the pictures. Like, I love old gas mask photos from the Second World War. I have one in my spare room of a lady with a gas mask on putting on lipstick. I don't know, I just like stuff like that. I think they're kind of cool, and I love old Second World War posters and First World War posters. I think they're really interesting, you know, from an art perspective. Then you have your review page. Nothing really to talk about here, nothing that overly interested me. I've got a review of The Elephant Man, a movie I've never seen. I should really watch. I know I should watch. And then it goes on to talk about pastilla. Pastilla? I keep saying pastilla because, you know, Spain, but only one else, so pastilla. And it's a cake made with sour apples, honey, and eggs, and is described as tasting like a giant marshmallow, which kind of interests me. I mean, who doesn't like apples and who doesn't like marshmallows? A marshmallow that tastes like an apple, I would totally eat that. And I'm thinking about making it. If you don't know, if you don't follow me on Instagram, I did make the gingerbread from the last All About History magazine I reviewed. It's up on my story. Like, if you go on my little stories on my profile, you can find it. And oh, it was so tasty. So I really want to make this. The only thing is, it takes like 6 hours to make. So I have to set a day aside and go about baking. But that is the end of my All About History magazine review for issue 90. If you enjoyed this review, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel so you will not miss the next review of All About History, which is about Henry and Francis I. And I'm really looking forward to reading this one because I do love a bit of the Tudors. So until next time, guys, bye!